brachtest zu ihm meine Klage, zu mir trat er auf dein Gebot.
Good evening and welcome to the Royal Opera House, both to those of you here in the historic Crush Room and those of you watching worldwide on YouTube. My name is Margaret Reynolds, and tonight we're going to take you through thinking about the brand new production of Richard Wagner's Lohengrin here at the Opera House, a tale of mystery, love and tragedy. We started with a performance with just 12 of the 90 members of the Royal Opera Chorus who'll be performing in this production. They were directed by William Spalding and performed the beautiful Swan Chorus from Act 1 of Lohengrin. We're going to hear more from them in just a moment as they take us through Wagner's masterful score. Also tonight, I'll be talking to the stars of this production, Jennifer Davis and Klaus Florian Vogt, and to director David Alden about this new production and what it is that makes this story so captivating. As always, we want to hear from you. So please do leave us your comments and questions on YouTube, and we'll have time, hopefully, to read some of those out later. This new production of Lohengrin premieres on the 7th of June. So please visit the Royal Opera House website for tickets and more information. The plot of Lohengrin. The state of Brabant is in a state of disorder. Something has gone terribly wrong, and King Heinrich of Germany arrives to try and sort it out. Count Friedrich von Telramund steps forward to explain to him what it is that has happened. The old Duke of Brabant has died, leaving two children, a daughter, Elsa, and a younger son, Gottfried. Elsa was actually promised in marriage to Friedrich, but one day she took her brother out for a walk in the woods and she came home alone. Friedrich surmised immediately from her pallor and her silence, and silence is a very important topic in this opera, that she was guilty. So he decided to marry another girl, Ortrud, who was also descended from a different royal line in Brabant. The king calls for Elsa, and ask her four questions. Her name, if she understands the charge that is made against her, will she accept his judgment, and what is her response to the charge of fratricide? She says nothing, silence again. But she indicates that she is innocent. The king asks her if she and Friedrich will accept his judgment by trial by combat. Elsa tells how she had prayed and a vision had come to her of a radiant man in bright armor. The king asks if they will now call their champions. Friedrich stands forth and the herald calls for Elsa's champion. No one appears. The herald calls again. Still, no one appears. The crowd mutters, God's silence is the judgment. But then suddenly there's a shout from the river. And on the banks of the river, a man standing forth sees a boat coming up the river, drawn by a swan on a golden chain. And in it is the realization of Elsa's vision. The knight will undertake to fight with her and asks for her hand. But there is one condition. Under no circumstances is she to ask him his name or his lineage. Twice he asks Elsa if she will accept this condition, and in front of all the people, she does so. When the king strikes his shield, the unknown knight and Friedrich do battle. Friedrich is soon overcome, but the knight spares his life. Act 2 opens as Friedrich and Ortrud are seen in the darkness outside the palace, where wedding celebrations are going on. He accuses his wife of falsehood. It was she who had told him that Elsa had killed Gottfried. Ortrud is unrepentant. How does he know that the knight comes from God? It may be that he is a product of false magic. As Elsa appears at the window, Friedrich makes as if to speak to her. No, says Ortrud, you deal with the hero, she is mine. Ortrud begs for Elsa's protection. In a central duet, Elsa rejoices that she will be able to teach Ortrud the power of love and faith, and Ortrud sees that in Elsa's pride are the seeds to her downfall. In the morning, the crowds gather for the wedding. As Elsa approaches the steps of the church, Ortrud accosts her. Then Friedrich does the same. Both taunt Elsa with the fact that she does not know her husband's name. Act 3 begins with a famous wedding march as the curtain rises on the bridal chamber. In a long and complicated duet, Elsa begs the knight to reveal his name. She uses all kinds of different ruses to do this. As she becomes more and more agitated, Friedrich breaks into the room. The knight strikes Friedrich dead and tells Elsa to prepare to meet the king. In the morning, everybody gathers again on the banks of the river. The knight appears to answer Elsa's question. He is the guardian of the Holy Grail and the son of Parsifal. His name is Lohengrin. But the condition of his being in the world must be that his name is unknown. Now he has to leave, though Elsa begs him not to do so. As once before, the mystical swan appears. Ortrud gives vent to her triumph and rage, but as Lohengrin kneels to pray, the Holy Spirit descends, the swan is transformed into the lost Gottfried, and Elsa, heartbroken, dies in his arms as everyone else looks on horrified. And now I'd like to welcome soprano Jennifer Davis and tenor Klaus Florian Vogt to talk to us about the characters of Elsa and Lohengrin. Hi, Jennifer. Klaus. Yes. So, Jennifer, this is the debut of your role as Elsa.
Yeah.
So you've obviously been thinking a lot about her and who she is. So can you tell us something about what you think the major elements of her character are?
She's quite complicated in a lot of ways, but I think ultimately she is a beacon of light and hope within the piece. And she's quite privileged, you know, she's grown up a duchess, so, you know, she prays for something and he turns up. So, you know, she's got a lot of power in that way as well. She's got a couple of moments where that kind of isn't such a great thing. She's a little bit rude to Ortrud a couple of times, but Ortrud kind of has it coming, so it's okay. But I think at heart, she's a very good person. She's pure, she's got this purity, this almost sort of beautiful naivety about her. And I think that's what's really special about her, because there isn't really a glint of any darkness in her, which is quite unusual.
Yeah, you get the music to do that with.
Of course.
But what about in your performance? How do you convey that confidence and innocence?
The music does all the work for me in a lot of ways, to be honest. I have to use my voice in a very pure, controlled way. I've got all these beautiful, long, sweeping phrases to sing. And also I'm reacting to everybody else around me quite a lot of the time, so they do a lot of work for me too. But it's quite, and actually this show is quite active for me. He has me doing a lot of stuff, so that helps. I'm not just standing there, which is, unique. Usually she's sort of standing there looking nice, but not in this one. So.
Okay. Sounds intriguing.
Yeah.
Klaus, you have sung Lohengrin before.
Yeah.
You sung it first in 2002, am I right?
The first time, yeah.
Yes. So here you are coming again to the role. Is it always different every time you sing it, or is it the same? Who is he? Because he is quite an enigma.
Oh, it's always different, and this is the interesting thing with this stuff and this part and this opera, that you that you never get bored of this singing and acting and doing this character. And so this character for me is really he's a really straight person, a very friendly person. For him is honor and trust is a very, very important thing. And so he's for me also he is a very bright and lighty person, and I think because of that he gets so quick in love with Elsa.
Yes, almost at once. He says, "I love you, Elsa,"
Yeah.
as soon as he's arrived on the scene.
Yeah, it's the question if he knows her before from anywhere, but we do it that he explores the whole thing in the moment, in the first moment.
Yeah. In the second act, you get this really intense scene, which is just you two, with Elsa endlessly asking the question.
Oh, Act 3. Yeah.
Sorry,
yeah.
I'm so sorry. Of course it's Act 3. Good job you know what you're talking about. Yes, absolutely. So
Yes.
it's in Act 3. And that must be really quite an interesting set piece for you two to be working on together.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it starts off so beautifully. They're so in love,
Yes.
and it's their wedding night, and it starts off being so blissful. And very quickly it sort of starts to unravel. Orchard and Telramund have put a lot of doubt in Elsa's mind about, whether she should ask him who he is. And, to begin with, she has this another side of, her purity is that she has this incredible faith. And she really believes strongly that if she believes hard enough, it will be okay. And I think but she's so human in that, she can't not ask it. She gets driven to the point where she has to. It just comes out of her. And I don't think she really feels how bad the consequences will be. And again, I think that's because she's got this sort of incredible faith in herself as well. I mean, she has a dream about a guy and he comes and saves her. So she thinks that she's pretty much on God's side, I think. And, I say to him, you can tell me we're alone. Nothing bad will happen, but she doesn't realize the extent of what will happen if she does ask him.
What's going on
But I think Lohengrin knows what he knows from the very beginning what happens if she asks, and because of that he's in the beginning so strong with her, and because he wants her to understand how important it is not to ask, and and I think for him all the time. Over all the story is this what I have to leave when she asks, and this is his big sorrow. And in this beginning of third act, my first line is wir sind allein zum ersten Mal allein, the first time alone, and this is it.
Yeah. Actually, of course, he's the one who's always trying to bring it back to a kind of romantic
Yeah.
feeling in that scene, isn't he?
Because he notices what her doubt and her Neugier, was is Neugier? Yeah, thank you. And he wants to bring her back to the story.
Yeah. He keeps trying to distract her, but she's kind of
She's
on the train.
What's the most challenging thing about these roles? Because both of you are pretty much on stage almost all the time. You only get that brief bit when Ortrud and Friedrich are talking.
Yeah, basically.
So
20 minutes.
Yeah. So it must be pretty exhausting just playing physically.
For me, it's the concentration, I think, because even when I'm not singing, there's so much to listen to, not just in what's happening musically, but there's so much incredible text that's happening. There's so many things that you hear. It's keeping alive and awake and in the moment for the duration of the whole piece without sort of feeling a little tired and switching off a little bit. So that's for me, that's the most tiring thing, the concentration.
You can't do it. You have to be present all the time on stage, because it's very important what you said, that all the things happening around you are important for you also. So you can't mentally disappear for a moment. You have always to be there. And it's a big thing of concentration.
So what's it been like working with David Alden and conductor Andreas Nielsen?
It's been great. I've had a great time.
Me too.
They're both, they're so different, but David's just like a Energizer bunny. He's just so full of energy, isn't he? He's just, and it's quite infectious, you know. He really gets you to go there physically, which is actually really wonderful in these pieces, because a lot of the time directors, I think, can be a little scared to ask you to do too much because of the concentration, because of how long the opera is and the singing and everything. But he's just like, do it, you know, and that's really interesting, and it's great for me, especially because it's my first time singing Elsa, so it's nice to do it in such a full-on physical way. And Andres is just spectacular, really.
Yeah, Andres is wonderful,
yeah.
and for me it's very interesting how David needs the distance to the stage. Now we are on stage, working on stage since beginning of this week, and he needs the whole picture to arrange some things, and it's really interesting.
And what do you think that, you know, this is an opera, okay, so the way that it's set originally for Wagner, it's based on a medieval legend. And I know this is a bit mean to ask you this, but do you think that this has contemporary relevance now, this opera? As you've been thinking through and working through these characters?
I think so, because I think ultimately the piece is about hope and about, you know, being in troubled times, and this incredible person comes to save everybody, and it doesn't quite go to plan, and like the disappointment of that hope potentially being lost is, I think, very relevant to today. I won't mention anything political, but you know, we could see some similarities there for sure.
Yeah, but also the element of trust and hope and yeah, this is actual like ever.
There is a kind of hope in the end, though, isn't there? Because what's another interesting from your point of view, Klaus, is the relationship between Lohengrin and the Swan.
Yeah.
Because he gets these two really moving arias addressing the Swan. And it turns out to be Gottfried, so that's kind of all right.
Yeah.
So is that the sort of center of the hope that Lohengrin so represents?
Yeah, it's a important thing, of course, but for me the main important thing is that this order that he has to leave when he's asked about his name and his that he does it, and that he's that he is doing what he's told.
That must be quite an emotional
Oh yeah.
moment for you in Act 3 when he leaves everything.
Yeah, because I love her, and
And he keeps calling her my sweet wife.
I want to stay. I want to stay, but I can't. I'm not allowed to.
Yeah, and for Elsa, it's desperate because on the one hand she's losing Lohengrin, which is devastating for her, and in the same instance she's getting her brother back, who she thought was dead. So there's this incredible pull for her, which is really interesting, and she's sort of pulled between wanting to hold her brother but also wanting to run after him. It's a really interesting end to everything. It's
Those last moments.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the tragedy is what I'm singing at the very end, that if she had waited for 1 year, he would have been returned, and I could stay, but no.
So you didn't say that,
Yeah.
So, just very briefly then, if you were trying to persuade somebody to come and see this opera, this particular version of Lohengrin, Elsa, what would you say?
Oh, I mean, the music.
Elsa, I'm so sorry that I'm
Elsa.
doing it. It's okay. Jennifer.
Well, for one thing, the chorus. I know you're only hearing, you're hearing 10 or 11 of them. I mean, there are 100 of them in the piece, and they just sound extraordinary. They're worth your ticket money alone. It's just incredible. It's such a lovely cast. We have such a beautiful cast, and everyone's a beautiful actor as well as a fantastic singer, I think. So it's definitely worth coming to see. And I think David's done something really interesting with the staging. It's not your usual Lohengrin, so any Lohengrin fans will be very curious.
Klaus?
You think so?
You think?
Yeah.
You don't?
No.
What then would you, if you were trying to persuade somebody to come and see it?
I think it's this music is so big and so great and so nice, and what you said, all the performers are so incredibly good, and I think it will be a very nice evening.
So 7th of June, you're looking forward to that?
Absolutely.
Ready?
Yeah. I'm ready. I'm ready to give it to people. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
We could start tomorrow.
Yeah.
I think so.
I'd be happy with that.
Well, that's very reassuring and very exciting. Thank you very much indeed,
Thank you.
Jennifer Davis and Klaus Florian.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Don't forget that we want to hear from you this evening. So please leave your comments and questions on YouTube, and we'll try and read some out later on. The chorus, as we've just heard, are an integral part of the story and the music of Lohengrin. And to tell us more about this masterful score, please welcome back chorus director William Spalding and Genevieve Ellis.
Thank you very much for that introduction. Lohengrin. The name of an opera. Lohengrin, the name of its principal character. Lohengrin is a word that scatters itself across the pages of an opera rehearsal schedule. An entry in an encyclopedia, an essay in an opera book you might have at home. But in the heart of the opera chorus singer, the word Lohengrin occupies a special place. No other opera, no other work, no other word can quite go there. This is because Wagner lavished his energies on the chorus part to an extent unrivaled in just about any other work. Lohengrin is unique in sheer amount of material that the chorus has to sing, but also in richness of variation. Now, to get started, I'd like you to imagine that you see a woman on stage. She's been accused of a horrible crime and called to defend herself. She's sad, a bit dreamy, and afraid no one will believe her side of the story. This is indeed our very own Elsa, Act 1, Scene 2, and she sings not a single note, but the orchestra depicts her state. Thank you, Genevieve Ellis. You can hear all of Elsa's sadness in there, her helplessness, her dreaminess. And we feel sure that our perceptions are well-founded, that we get it, as we would say today. And yet the experience is incomplete. What's missing? Well, we're sitting there in the theater amongst hundreds of fellow spectators at the Royal Opera House. It goes into the thousands. And while I might be sure of my own take on the proceedings, I don't yet know what my neighbors think, which, loth as we may be to admit, is important to us. That's why we read the newspaper and watch the news and gossip about the latest political scandal in the pub and on the train into town. It's comforting to know that we think and feel like others do. And we need this in the theater too. And here's where the chorus comes in. The spectator is part of the community in the auditorium, and he equates that community with the community he sees on stage, the chorus. And though the audience clearly see a helpless and dreamy young woman, and the orchestra tells us all we need to know about her, it's when the chorus articulates what the audience already feels, giving it a name and a face, that here a bond is created between the auditorium and the stage that wouldn't otherwise exist. And so, to perform the same passage, this time as Wagner wrote it, I ask you to welcome the gentlemen members of the Royal Opera Chorus and Extra Chorus. You can hear how it's a completely different experience. Seeing this helpless, confused young woman and the chorus articulated in such rich detail and with such differentiation. You heard 5 very short phrases, each one of them, no one of them is like another one. And so let's have a look at how this works in other passages. At the very beginning of the opera, the king's herald announces the monarch's presence. The king says, basically, hi guys, listen up, we need to talk. So,
Heinrich, der deutschen König, kam zur Stadt mit euch zu dingen nach des Reiches Recht. Gebt ihr nun Fried und folge dem Gebot. Wir geben Fried und folge dem Gebot. Willkommen, König in der Hand. Gott grüß euch, liebe Männer von Brabant.
Very nice, guys. Yes, you can hear how we're on the strength of this little moment where we have this chance for the announcement to sink in, that we possess readiness to hear the king's message. So the king told the story of Elsa's supposed crime and now must pass judgment. Turns out there was this old tradition, bear with me here, whereby the sovereign would remove his shield and hang it on a tree, vowing to leave it there until a verdict be pronounced. This is before the age of reason. The herald then calls Elsa that she may answer the charge. So now we go to the next job.
Nicht soll bergen mich der Schild, bis ich gerichtet streng und mild. Nicht so steinige das Bild, bis Kind und Urteil recht. Wo ihr des Königs Schild gewahrt, dort Recht und Urteil nun erfahrt, etc. Very nice. Now, in Elsa's famous aria, she promises her hand in marriage to the knight in shining armor she's dreamt of. The bystanding noblemen are impressed and a bit envious. A beautiful prize, though it lie in God's hands. Will Gemahl mich heißen, geb ich ihm, was ich bitte. You probably heard, ladies and gentlemen, how the singing got rather suddenly very soft. The soft part was when the word Gott, I guess I don't have to translate that, was mentioned. Now, if you think about it, that's a bit strange, isn't it? Normally in an opera, when the text turns to the Almighty, we're talking higher notes, louder voices, and the orchestra might get the trumpets out and everything, and all else you will hear that proclaim glory and splendor. For example, the Easter hymn that maybe some of you still have in your ears from early this year that we performed, Cavalleria Rusticana. It's all Signor, Signor, Signor. It just gets louder and higher and louder and higher. But here it's the opposite. The voice gets softer and lower, obviously emphasizing a different aspect of faith, so it's all about the humility aspect of faith here. Similarly, in the third act, Lohengrin asks the nobles for justification in felling Friedrich Telramund, having been surprise attacked by him. Da dieser Mann zur Nacht mich überfallen, saht, ob ich ihn mit Recht erschlug. Die deine Hand in Stund auf Erden soll tun. There again, you heard the reduction of volume and lowering of voice ranges when God is spoken of. I've taken these two examples because they just give you a bit of an idea of how rich Wagner's thinking was into the deeper aspects of his work and how much he entrusted to the chorus, which is what we value so highly. Now, until now, you've only heard the gentlemen in this portion of the program, and indeed there are quite a few passages which require only the tenors and basses. But this next number is indeed scored for the full chorus, so I'd like you to welcome the ladies, members of the Royal Opera Chorus and Extra Chorus. Ladies, come and join us, please. You can see that the ladies are about outnumbered, but I'd like to take a moment and pay a special compliment to these terrific vocal artists who are performing these passages in greatly reduced numbers. It's really quite admirable the way you can conjure up the illusion of 100 or more singers in this room. So special thanks to all of you, really. In case you're waiting for the famous bridal chorus, I am afraid I must disappoint you. We thought that it would be better to illuminate some of the maybe lesser known aspects of this opera, and I'll admit it, I figured we just had the royal wedding anyway, so, you know. I hope you're not too disappointed by that. The trial by combat from Act 1, called by the king to decide Elsa's fate, is consecrated by a solemn and glorious prayer. Verlass mich nicht, mein Herr und Gott, und zag ich nicht, mein Herr und The score of Lohengrin has a reputation for being square. By that, I don't mean boring, bland, or uneventful, but rather, I'm talking about the types of counting that musicians do, the time signatures. Everything is in 2 or 4 or a multiple subdivision of it. There's a total absence of ternary measures, save what we just heard, the prayer, in 3/4 time. Now, this is no accident. In earlier times, there was the tempus perfectum, which was in 3, reflecting the Trinity and all things associated with it, and the tempus imperfectum, which was in 2. So the idea of perfection was associated with the number 3. Let us hear the prayer of thanksgiving in Beethoven's Fidelio when Leonora solemnly loosens her imprisoned husband's chains. Euch, liebe Frau allein, ziemt es in Gott. can obviously hear the three and the prayer, and there's no end to examples of this kind of thing. Just it's quite interesting. And in the prayer from Lohengrin, the key signature is also three flats, and the musical texture is rife with triplets. Da, 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 da. So, as long as we're on the subject of parallels to other works, we might as well mention the most influential composition of the 19th century, a piece no composer, and most of all no German composer, could get around. Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, and one of its seminal moments. You will hear the text, "And the cherub stands before God," which is repeated a couple times, and then the final Gott is sounded on quite an unexpected chord. Und der Cherub steht vor Gott, steht vor Gott, vor Gott, vor Gott. Thank you, Genevieve. Well, what does that have to do with Lohengrin, any of that? Well, let's go back to the Swan Chorus and see. The Swan Chorus depicts a true miracle, ein Wunder in German. Listen to what the chorus sing when they reach the word Wunder. We good? No, 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 no. Thank you. We don't really want to stop singing, but we have to get around with the program. Lovely, guys. Thank you. And ladies, of course. Yes, I hope you come away from that convinced of the connection. It is such an important moment in the Ninth Symphony, and so it coincides with the word Wunder. That's the point here. That's the first time that the word ein Wunder, that they say a miracle has occurred. There's one character we haven't talked about a whole lot. That's Ortrud. Turns out she's the real cause of all the evil in the opera, and at the very, very end, she lets her mask fall, revealing a horrible sorceress who had cursed the heir of Brabant. The chorus reacts to her shameless revelation accordingly. Ein Tag, das den Ritter du vertrieben, nun gibt der Schwan ihm Heimgeleit. Der Held wär länger er geblieben, der Bruder hätt er auch befreit. Exactly. Yes. She's a bit like Voldemort, I think. You know, it's just this I want to see the death in your eyes, Harry. Right? In terms of the bond established between the masses in the auditorium and the ones on stage, I have a personal favorite, and we've saved it for last. Lohengrin, having miraculously arrived on the scene, as foretold in Elsa's dream, takes leave of his swan. The reaction, English, how we are seized with blissful, sweet trembling, what blessed power holds us enthralled. I mean, you can imagine, you know, guy comes on a swan. That's a bit funny, right? But, I mean, he's appearing just as Elsa has dreamt of him. And I'd also like to share with you the German here. It's thoroughly unaggressive, thoroughly unpercussive, almost Italianate in its lyricism. Wie fasst uns selig süßes Grauen, welch holde Macht hält uns gebannt. Wie ist er schön und hehr zu schauen, den solch ein Wunder trug ans Land. leb wohl, leb wohl, mein lieber Schwan. Lovely indeed, ladies and gentlemen. Very good. Ladies and gentlemen, we hope we have enjoyed. We hope we have enjoyed. We hope all have enjoyed. We hope you have enjoyed. I get my pronouns mixed up sometimes. This little foray into the chorus part of Lohengrin, and most of all, we are grateful for the opportunity to share with you why we are so crazy about what we do. So once again, ladies and gentlemen of the Royal Opera, members of the Royal Opera Chorus, and Genevieve Ellis on the piano. You need this, don't you?
Thank you to the chorus of the Royal Opera House, William Spalding and Genevieve Ellis. We'll be hearing from the chorus again later on in the programme when they'll be singing Toni Siegesweis from Act 3. Wagner's Lohengrin was first performed on August the 28th, 1850 at the Deutsches National Theatre and Staatskapelle in Weimar. Wagner had first had the idea of an opera based on Lohengrin in 1841, and this was the beginning of his interest in the Arthurian legends, which would lead to later works like his great opera Parsifal. He worked on the opera backwards. He actually had the key idea for what was going to go on in Lohengrin for the third act, and he sketched that out first, then the second, then the first. And he completed the orchestration in the winter and spring of 1848. But by the time Lohengrin was ready for performance, Wagner had had to flee Germany and was living in exile in Zurich. A lot of the opera may have been based on a medieval legend, but a lot of what goes into this opera actually comes from Wagner's real life. The troubles in Brabant that begin the opera mirror the fact that all across Europe during the years of the 1840s, there were uprisings and unrest in Italy, in Hungary, and in Germany. By 1849, there were calls for the founding of a new constitutional monarchy to rule a united Germany. Living in Dresden, then a cultural center that was quite liberal and democratic, Wagner himself wrote for a radical newspaper, and he supported the provisional government. And when the revolt took place in early May 1849, he actually made hand grenades for the insurgents and took part in riots. The police issued a warrant for his immediate arrest, and on the list of the description of Wagner, it said, special characteristics, rapid in movements and speech. That kind of sounds like what we imagine Wagner to be, doesn't it? Fleeing the prospect of prison or even death, Wagner disguised himself as a coachman and escaped to Switzerland. Thus it was, so the story goes, that Wagner sat in the Hotel Swan, of course, in Zurich, with his watch in his hand, silently imagining Liszt conducting the first performance far away in Weimar. In his private life, too, it's possible to see some of the elements that went into Lohengrin. Wagner had married an actress called Mina Planner in 1836, but this relationship was tempestuous right from the start. Apparently, they were even quarreling at the altar in front of the clergyman who was about to marry them. Wagner complained of the many men who still pursued Mina because of her career in the theatre. She complained about his extravagance. When he ended up in a debtor's prison in Paris, it was Minna who had to send to her friends in Germany for money to get him out. After they settled in Dresden, he held the post of Royal Kapellmeister, and Minna enjoyed the social standing it gave her. But then, as she saw it, he threw it all away with the Dresden uprising and carried her off to provincial Switzerland. No wonder then that Wagner creates a heroine in Elsa who is supposed to keep silent, ask no questions, and trust her husband completely. There's one other element in the story of Lohengrin that may have had a personal significance for Wagner. Even as a very young man, he was certain of his own genius and of the sanctity of his calling. Similarly, Lohengrin wants to be known only by his deeds. His name and lineage are not to be challenged. Well, the same goes for the composer. Wagner was only 6 months old when his father Karl died of typhus. But pretty soon afterwards, his mother Johanna went to live with a friend of the family, the playwright Ludwig Geyer. Until he was 16 years old, Wagner was known as Wilhelm Richard Geyer. And some critics have speculated that Wagner may have suspected that Geyer was his birth father. In those days, of course, Wagner could only guess. But the question of where you come from, origin and inheritance, can still give rise to anxiety even now when we do have the reassurance or the curse of DNA testing. In Wagner's mind, he stands alone. Just as no one can ask about Lohengrin's name or lineage, neither can they question the composer. In many ways, this radiant knight, chosen by God, defending truth and justice, appearing magically before us in a theatrical coup, is a portrait of the artist, of Wagner himself. So now, to tell us about his vision for Wagner's epic opera, please welcome David Alden.
Hi.
Please, if you would like to sit here.
Okay.
Thank you. They're a bit high, David.
That's okay.
There we are.
I'd like to get a little high now. That's good.
Oh, good.
It's a long rehearsal day, so yeah.
Yes, good start. So you're coming to this production.
Yes.
How do you, in general, when you're thinking about a new opera and thinking about what you're going to do with it and what it speaks to you about, how do you go about preparing?
Well, I've known this opera since, I would say, something like 1965. I was very young. Unbelievably young, yes, then. But I mean, Wagner is really the thing which brought me into the world of opera. I come from a sort of theatrical family, and I knew plays and musicals, but then I started to get into opera, and it was really Wagner which turned me on to opera as drama and as theater. And it really brought me into this profession and this world. And I've known Lohengrin for 50 years or so, and I've waited till now to do it. I've done almost all the other Wagner operas here and there, and it's a thrill to finally get to do this. So it's not like I started on it a couple of weeks ago. I mean, I've listened to recordings all my life, and I've studied older performances, and I've seen it quite a few times, and it's been brewing up inside me a long time. But then, of course, when you actually sit down to work on a piece, you have to make concrete decisions. You have colleagues, you have a designer and a conductor, and people that are your primary colleagues, and it's a process of discussion and kicking things around for for a year or two. Mostly with the designer, that's the primary relationship. And yeah, and it's about what's happening in the world as you're thinking about the opera. And somehow because you want to make it, about timely and consequent and and you're fed by whatever is happening now. Yeah.
Tell us about working at the Opera House, because you've been here before.
Yes.
And what's special about the
It's
Opera
a
House?
sensational machine. It's an amazing place because they do so many productions of operas, ballets. There's a performance almost every night. And it's mind-boggling, actually, the amount of work which they put out on an incredibly high level, because the people who are doing the work, the technical people, the people in the management, my assistants, the chorus, the orchestra, all of these people are on a very, very, very high level of achievement, and they can do miracles within the amount of time they have to do a show. It doesn't get better than this, to be honest, anywhere in the world that I've been.
So, okay, yes, you've been thinking about Lohengrin all this long time. But as you say, once you started to work on it and talk to the designer and think about what you were going to do, what kind of key ideas were coming to you out of the story or out of the music?
Well, Wagner is always very complicated because there is always many different ways you can approach a Wagner opera, and there's many different conceptual approaches to it. And I always feel with Wagner that you should try and be as simple as you can and not try to cover all the philosophical and etc. bases, but to really think of something clean and emotional and simple that hits the jugular and that can really let people into the piece emotionally and not bombard them with too many images, concepts, or whatever. And so Paul Steinberg, the set designer, and I, basically, we were just trying to figure out the emotional temperature of the place that Brabant, where this story was taking place. It's a fairy tale, Lohengrin, but it's a fairy tale for adults. It's a complicated, somewhat ambiguous story. It seems like it's about black and white. It seems like Telramund and Ortrud are the evil people, and Elsa and Lohengrin are the pure people. But actually, when you start to look at these people and how they intertwine, it's not anywhere near as black and white as that. The characters are complicated, and indeed, the story, the place where it's happening is complicated because piece takes place during a time of war. It's supposed to be in 10th century Brabant in Antwerp, what is now Antwerp, and it takes place in a time of war. And into the lives of these Flemish people comes the German King Henry with his troops, and he's trying to persuade, the Flemish men to join his army and fight the Hungarian hordes who are attacking Germany from the east. And it's a very tense situation at the beginning because you really feel that the King Heinrich, is coming in, and it's not that he's inviting the great people of Flanders to join him. It's like he's inviting them, he's making them an offer they can't refuse. It's almost like he's marching in and taking over the place. And so we wanted to make a situation that at the beginning was very tense. And the whole emotional life of this piece, it's about a whole nation who are deeply troubled and who are desperately looking for a leader or a savior or something. I mean, this could take place in any era, really. It's a sort of a deep picture of the human condition, of people who are leaderless, and where the politics among the warring factions is so complicated and unpleasant, and the people are just dying, and also they're oppressed by the war and being dragged off into yet another war that they don't necessarily want to be in. So we created a sort of abstract space, like a Bond. It's not exactly a bombed-out city because it makes it sound too modern and too reductive, but it's a sort of dreamscape of a city in trouble, which is very empty and in which the people are being herded around from place to place and hiding and very hungry and then dragged into this meeting hall in the first act where this king is impressing them and pulling them into his army, so into his war, really. And so, so we've created a rather abstract world, a sort of a city.
Even with the publicity photographs that we've seen, there is that kind of bombed-out city. And I was very struck by that because, the fact of the war going on right at the beginning of the opera, is there a way in which the fact that this is a country at war, this is a place where everybody knows, is very uncertain about what's going on, for you, in some ways, does that make sense of the psychological complexity of what is going on between Elsa and Lohengrin? I mean, nobody knows where they stand.
Right, exactly. And so into the middle of this maelstrom of politics and violence and terror and hunger, the middle of it is the emblem of the whole world being rudderless, is this thing that's happening to this poor Princess Elsa, who's been accused of killing her brother and has been thrown into prison and is now dragged into this sort of mob trial, and it doesn't look at all good for her. And it's like this one girl, this powerless innocent, is like stands for everybody in the world. She's absolutely without, she needs help, and no one is really going to give it to her. And she's being outmaneuvered by this great political woman, Ortrud, and her kind of sort of paranoid, sort of powerless husband that she really controls and browbeats.
I mean, obviously, I don't know what you have done with this, but sometimes I think of Ortrud as a sort of Lady Macbeth figure trying to get Friedrich on board and keep going.
It's very much that. She's the power behind what she wishes was the throne. Yeah, and so into this appears out of nowhere, out of the ether, this man that nobody knows, this beautiful, in the midst of this warlike, dark, filthy place comes this man in this production, a man in a white suit, slightly rumpled white suit, like who knows what he's like, and he's appearing there and sitting on the edge of the water, and he comes from nowhere, and he brings immediately this aura of love and peace, and yes, it's very 60s. Not really, because what they say about...
Doesn't really go with Wagner.
Well, no, not really, okay. The people, this is what the people need. They need a savior, they need some, and it's a fairy tale. He saves the princess in this combat, hand-to-hand combat that God is supposed to decide. And then the story goes on, and the interesting thing then is that the king realizes almost immediately that this man who is such a peaceful dreamer, but has obviously such power, can be used in his military conquests. And so for the rest of the opera, it's like this man the king tries to pull him into his fascist world and make him the leader, really, because the people will follow this man, this new man, anywhere. And so there's this tension all the way through about the king trying to militarize this man who is unmilitarizable. That's a real word, yes.
Yes, he's completely other, isn't he?
Yes, he's completely other, yes. And just as for a director and the singer singing Lohengrin, who this man is and how you play this man and how you present this man is very interesting. I feel that when this guy appears among these people from Brabant, it's like he doesn't really know who he is. He doesn't really know how he got there. He doesn't really know what his name is or what he's all about, but he senses that he's there for a reason, and he starts to figure it out during the course of the opera. He starts to figure out why he's there and what his goal is and what his job is, but at the same time, he's so fascinated by these people he finds himself among, but so completely different from them, and they try and pull him into their lives, and he just can't. He just instinctively refuses to join the machine and join the world of these people. And it's a very interesting acting challenge for the tenor, I would say. It's almost beyond any tenor I ever met. I don't know. Well, but I mean, it's great. It's a beautiful thing to try and do. Yeah.
So as the audience leave the theatre, after they've seen your Lohengrin, what are you hoping that they're going to be feeling?
Wagner said this was his most tragic of operas, and which is extraordinary considering all the tragedies that he wrote, the darkness. But there's always at the end of his operas a sort of redemption, and that someone is released from the earthly, torment or whatever, or love or whatever, and into a beautiful love death or into a purification or something. But in this piece, it's the figure, as you said, the artist figure, Lohengrin. Humanity can't take somebody like that, and they can't allow him. It's like Christ, really. You know, they have to drive him out, or they have to crucify him, and they can't. Humanity can't take it, and they drive him away, and there's simply no hope at the end. It's completely dark ending. And when Wagner wrote the piece, a lot of people that he knew, his friends and people he trusted, said to him, "No, you've got to find a way. It's too bad. It's too dark." And he tried, but he couldn't. He knew this was the way. And of course, it is a very dark ending, but the thing is that the music in the whole evening is so beautiful and is so full of humanity and passion and love that it's not a terrible ending. It's a bittersweet ending, you know.
And there's two beautiful arias that...
There's 200 beautiful arias. of about 4 hours long altogether.
I do stand corrected. You're
Yes.
absolutely right. I was thinking of the two lovely moments when Lohengrin speaks to the swan.
Yes, the farewell, when he appears and then when he has to leave, both moments with the swan, yes. Fantastic music. He used the same swan motif decades later when he wrote Parsifal, because there's a swan in that, and he quoted himself.
And of course, the prelude suggests or takes us there again with the prayer that Lohengrin offers up.
Yeah, I mean,
end.
the prelude is this like 7 or 8 minutes of perfection. This is the image of the Grail, the Holy Grail in the castle, you know, being brought down by angels to humanity, and this is the gift to humanity. And what can they do with it? Can they cherish it or what? But then as soon as the story, and so it's perfection until the curtain goes up and you're in this horrible situation. And after that, perfection has been posited as a possibility. And can one get anywhere near that in our lives is the question.
But obviously Lohengrin is doing that for you to some degree.
Yeah, for sure.
Arriving there, yes. Thank you. Thank you very much
my
indeed.
pleasure.
David Alden.
Nice.
Thank you.
Okay.
Well, that just about brings us to the end of tonight's Insight. We've had lots of lovely comments on YouTube tonight. Lou from London would like to know how long the opera is. Well, as it's Wagner, that's actually quite an important question, I imagine. The answer is 4 hours and 45 minutes. And I would like to greet viewers from as far away as Argentina, Alabama, Germany, and Slovenia who've been watching us tonight. Don't forget that you can see this fabulous production, and it does look beautiful, because I got a little sneak glimpse, of Lohengrin here at the Opera House from the 7th of June. Visit the Royal Opera House website for tickets. Thank you to all our guests for joining us tonight. A big thanks to our wonderful audience here in the Crush Room, and thank you to all of you watching at home, all over the world. Now it's time for one final treat. Please welcome back members of the Royal Opera Chorus, led by chorus director William Spalding and accompanied by assistant chorus master Genevieve Ellis, performing Ertona Siegesweise from Act 3. Good night.
Alles, was ich bin, nimm an.